She was the first to vanish, then another and another. By the time the eighth woman was pulled from the swamps of Jennings, Louisiana, this town had already learned to stop asking questions. 8 women, each connected, each silenced, and the people who were supposed to protect them. They were either missing or mentioned by name. If you're drawn to the stories they try to bury, subscribe, because what you're about to hear is the kind of truth that doesn't just haunt a town, it rots it from the inside out. Picture a map of southern Louisiana, zoom into Jefferson Davis Parish, then tighter until you're in Jennings, a town of just over 10,000 people, one blinking stoplight at the edge of the bayou. Life here moves slow, real slow. Kids play in the streets, folks wave from porches, and if you drive too fast down Main Street, you'll stand out. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone talks. Or at least they used to. By the early 2000s, Jennings had already seen its share of struggles, poverty, unemployment, addiction creeping through like smoke in a locked room. But no one could have guessed how dark it would really get. Because starting in 2005, the silence was broken, not by sirens, not by gunshots, but by something older, slower, and more terrifying than anyone in this town could explain. Bodies. Women. Found face down in the water. One after another. Always someone they knew. Always someone close. And as the years rolled on, Jennings earned a new name. The town that doesn't sleep anymore. Not because it was awake, but because it was afraid to close its eyes. It began on May 20th, 2005. A fisherman was trolling through a stretch of canal just outside town when he spotted something in the water. At first, he thought it was debris, maybe a tangle of clothes or trash washed in from the highway. But as his boat drifted closer, he saw skin, hair, a woman's body, bloated and bruised, floating just beneath the surface. She was identified as 28-year-old Loretta Chasen Lewis, a mother of 2. She'd been missing for just 3 days. She'd last been seen leaving a motel. Witnesses said she was acting strange, paranoid, nervous. Loretta had struggled with addiction like many in Jennings, but this wasn't just another overdose. Her body was found half naked, dumped like garbage in a drainage canal. The official cause of death, undetermined. No visible wounds, no obvious trauma, and no answers. Just a family torn apart and a quiet town whispering rumors. If this had been an isolated tragedy, maybe it would have faded with time. But 3 weeks later, it happened again. Another woman, another canal, another mystery. That's when people started asking, what's happening in Jennings? And why are the same names showing up over and over again? At first, people wanted to believe it was just a tragic coincidence, a woman gone too soon. But by June 18th, just a month after Loretta's body surfaced, that illusion shattered. The second body was discovered 30-year-old Ernestine Patterson, found in another canal 2 miles from where Loretta had been dumped. Same conditions, same silence, same unanswered questions. Within 2 years, 6 more women would follow. Kristen Lopez, Whitney Dubois, Laconia, Muggy Brown, Crystal Shea, Benoit Zeno, Brittany Gary, and Nicole Guillory. All of them found dead. All of them dumped in water. All of them from the same circle, poor, struggling with addiction, involved in sex work, and deeply entangled in a part of Jennings most people didn't talk about. Some were found with broken bones, some with their throats cut, but most, like Loretta, were listed as undetermined. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no arrests. 8 women, 4 years, same town. And every time, the bodies were found in the swamps, canals, or drainage ditches that zigzag through the edges of Jennings like scars. Locals stopped calling it coincidence. They started calling it what it was: a pattern, a death loop, and no one seemed willing or able to stop it. To the outside world, they were names in a police file, faces in old mugshots, women with troubled pasts. But in Jennings, they were daughters, sisters, friends, and their stories mattered. Kristen Lopez had developmental delays and a trusting nature. She was just 21. Whitney Dubois had a contagious laugh and a 2-year-old son. Her mother said she always came home until she didn't. Brittany Gary was just 17, a child. She walked to a dollar store to buy minutes for her mom's phone. She never made it back. Every single one of them had lived hard lives. Some couch surfed, some sold sex to survive, some fell into drugs. But these weren't just broken stories, they were broken systems. Poverty, trauma, neglect. And here's the part that still sends a chill down the spine. Many of them knew each other, not just vaguely, they were close, real close. Kristen, Whitney, and Brittany had all stayed at the same house days before they died. Crystal Zeno had been best friends with Loretta. Muggy Brown had dated the same men Kristen did. This wasn't just a case of multiple murders in a small town. It was a social circle being hunted one by one. And the killer? It wasn't some shadowy figure in a van. It was someone who knew them, who walked the same streets, someone inside the circle. That's what terrified people most. In Jennings, the danger wasn't far away. It was already here. In big cities, it's easy to believe murders are random, anonymous. But in Jennings, everyone was part of someone's story. These women weren't just from the same town, they were from the same world. They lived together, partied together, sometimes dated the same men or the same cops. Kristen Lopez had stayed in the same house as Muggy Brown. Whitney Dubois had once been best friends with Brittany Gary's older sister. Crystal Zeno and Loretta were cousins. It wasn't 6 degrees of separation, it was one. And it wasn't just personal connections, they were tied through survival, through trauma, through that underground economy that forms when a town forgets how to take care of its own. Frankie Richard, a former strip club owner and local drug dealer, knew many of them intimately. Some called him a protector, others called him a predator. He was questioned over and over, but never charged. The deeper the investigators dug, the more the lines blurred. Ex-boyfriends, informants, local figures, deputies, names came up again and again. And that's when people started asking, was this just a killer targeting women? Or was it something more insidious, someone cleaning up secrets? As the bodies piled up, so did the unease, not just from the murders, but from the way they were handled. Families claimed they were ignored. Witnesses said their statements were lost. Key evidence misplaced, destroyed, or never logged at all. According to public records and investigative reporting, several officers involved in the case had personal relationships with the victims. One was rumored to be involved with one of the women shortly before her death. Another had been seen at the same parties. A third was later indicted on unrelated charges. But the most troubling claim came from inside. Leaked reports, published in national media outlets, suggested that evidence was intentionally mishandled, that a witness's tape-recorded statement naming suspects was erased. And that's when a word began to surface quietly, cautiously in Jennings. Cover up. The Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office denied wrongdoing. They insisted every effort was being made, but the public trust was already broken. In a small town like this, where everyone knows everyone, how do you report a crime when the person you're reporting it to might be sitting at the same table? And if the system's broken at the root, is justice even possible? At this point, the whispers weren't just coming from grieving families. They were echoing through national media, journalists, advocates, even former law enforcement officers. A 2014 investigative report by Vice laid it out plainly. There were serious concerns about how the Jeff Davis 8 case was being handled and who was doing the handling. Multiple members of the sheriff's office had alleged ties to the victims. One officer was reportedly living with a key witness. Another was accused of tipping off suspects. At least one was later arrested in a federal corruption case totally unrelated, but still tied to the same department. According to public statements and records, officers were removed, reassigned, or left quietly, but few were ever formally investigated in connection to the murders. The families demanded answers, but the more they pushed, the more they were told to wait, that things were complicated. And that's when another name started surfacing. A name known in every corner of Jennings, Frankie Richard. Some called him a monster, others just another man trying to survive the town's dark current. But one thing was clear: wherever the Jeff Davis 8 had been, Frankie had already been there. Frankie Richard was more than just a name. He was the axis many of the victims spun around. He owned a strip club in Jennings, sold drugs according to police. He was known for violence, manipulation, and some said protection. Several of the Jeff Davis 8 had either lived with him, worked for him, or partied at his place. And when the murders started, people noticed he kept showing up in the background. Police interviewed Frankie countless times. He even admitted to sleeping with several of the women, some of them the same night they went missing. He also claimed something darker, that some of the women were involved in an unofficial informant network, tipping off law enforcement in exchange for protection or leniency, that they were being used, then discarded. Frankie denied any involvement in the murders. He was arrested at least once in connection to the case, but the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. Witnesses recanted. Some were too scared to speak. Others just vanished. Until his death in 2020, Frankie Richard remained free, and many believe he died knowing exactly what happened to those women. But whether he was the killer or just the messenger, Frankie's silence was louder than any confession. In most murder cases, the evidence leads the story: a footprint, a fingerprint, a drop of blood, something, anything to say, here's what happened. But in Jennings, the trail wasn't just cold, it was swamp-soaked and vanishing fast. Each victim was found in similar conditions, partially clothed or naked, often in advanced stages of decomposition, dumped in water just deep enough to erase time. And yet, autopsies came back with a hauntingly consistent phrase: undetermined. That word appeared again and again in the coroner's reports. Undetermined cause, undetermined manner, no clear signs of trauma, no confirmed sexual assault, and with every passing day, the swamp did its work washing away DNA, softening tissue, breaking down the one thing that could speak for the dead, their bodies. One victim had a broken neck. Another showed signs of asphyxiation, but still undetermined. Families began to ask, were the autopsies rushed? Were key details overlooked? Were the women even properly examined? Then came the chain of custody problems, reports of lost evidence. One woman's clothing was misplaced. Another's rape kit was never processed. A bloody towel collected from a suspect's vehicle vanished. According to investigative reporting by the New York Times and BuzzFeed News, several pieces of physical evidence that could have helped build a case, surveillance footage, cell phone data, forensic samples, were either mishandled or not pursued at all. In one instance, police failed to secure a crime scene where a body had been found. Locals were allowed to walk nearby, contaminating what little could have been preserved. And when the FBI finally got involved in 2008, it wasn't because they were invited. It was because they were alarmed. Alarmed by the gaps, the delays, the sheer lack of movement in a case with 8 bodies in 4 years. To this day, no single piece of physical evidence has ever linked a suspect to any of the Jeff Davis 8 murders. No fingerprints, no murder weapon, no confirmed DNA. Just a town full of shadows, and families still waiting for the truth to surface from the mud. For most of America, the story of the Jeff Davis 8 ended on the evening news. But in Jennings, the story never ended. It just kept replaying, quietly, painfully, every single day. Imagine being a mother and watching 8 women disappear and no one being held responsible. No trial, no suspects, not even a theory you could hold onto. Ernestine Patterson's family held vigils along the canal where her body was found. Brittany Gary's mother walked the stretch of road from the dollar store to their house, retracing every step her daughter never got to finish. At first, they trusted the police, but over time, that trust curdled into bitterness. Families said their calls were ignored, that case files were closed without notice, that victims were treated like they deserved it because of addiction or sex work. They put up posters, held marches, pleaded in front of news cameras. Some joined forces with journalists and legal advocates. Others just sat in silence, holding on to photos that kept fading in the Louisiana heat. In 2014, protesters marched through Jennings with signs that read, "Justice for the Jeff Davis 8." Some wore t-shirts with the victims' names. Others screamed into microphones demanding a federal investigation. Still, no charges, no answers. Over the years, grief morphed into obsession. Mothers became investigators. Sisters turned into archivists. They weren't just mourning, they were chasing justice in a system that had long stopped chasing with them. And every time they told their story, they got the same response. We're still looking into it. But looking into what? The killer? The cover-up? Or the town itself, a place that had somehow learned to keep living, while 8 families were frozen in time? By 2008, whispers weren't enough. Pressure from national media, community protests, and concerned citizens forced higher powers to get involved. The FBI and Louisiana State Police stepped in not to take over, but to assist, to bring new eyes to the case, they said. But many in Jennings didn't buy it. To the families, this was déjà vu. Another agency, another round of interviews, more questions, fewer answers. According to official reports, the FBI compiled a task force. They re-interviewed witnesses, dug through case files, tried to connect the dots the local sheriff's office had supposedly missed. But even with federal backing, the outcome remained the same. No arrests, no suspects formally named, no killer identified. Some documents were sealed, others were redacted. Requests for transparency were met with ongoing investigation, disclaimers the kind that sound promising but mean very little after years of silence. By 2014, investigative momentum slowed. The task force lost traction. Focus shifted elsewhere. And Jennings was left right where it started, with 8 women buried and a community drowning in theories. Even today, the Jeff Davis 8 case remains open but cold. And while the file might sit quietly in a drawer somewhere, the people of Jennings, they remember every day. It's been nearly 2 decades since the first body was found. 8 women, all from the same small town, all connected, all gone. Some say it was a serial killer. Others believe it was a network, a cover up, a cleanup job, a warning. But whatever theory you choose to believe, one truth remains. The women of Jennings deserved better. Better protection, better investigation, better justice. And the fact that not a single arrest has ever been made, that's not just suspicious, it's shameful. So we end where it all began, on the edge of the swamp, where the water runs dark and quiet, and where the truth may still be waiting beneath the surface. Because until someone speaks, until someone is held accountable, the Jeff Davis 8 aren't just victims of murder. They're victims of silence,